what are those Christian lies that we were told to basically see ordinarily or indigenous belief system as demonic, or for us to demonize ordinarily? So the first one I'm going to be talking about is about Ekwensu. We all know that Ekwensu is not the devil. Ekwensu in the Igbo system is referred to as a deity, alose, of war, the deity of commercial activity, that's bargains, and the deity, or also seen as the master of revelation. Now, the truth here is that in Christianity, they perceive the devil as God's arch rival, the essence or the deity that is trying to basically make sure that it turns us from God by basically manipulating us or making us to act in ways that are very detestable. But Ekwensu does not do that. In Igbo system, first of all, as a deity of war, our ancestors instituted this Ekwensu essence or energy because they want to represent that energy when they go to war. They want to imbibe with that violent aspect of Ekwensu, and they want to basically use it to win their wars. Now, as for commercial activities, basically when people want to go into any business deal together, they imbibe the essence of Ekwensu. They can swear on an altar of Ekwensu to ensure that nobody kind of outsmarts the other person, or basically steal the other person's money. So it holds everybody in an agreement and ensures that all parties' needs are met and one person doesn't defraud the other person. Now, as the master of revelation, we need to understand that the word Ekwensu means Ikwe Osun or Ekwe Osun. So you can look at it as I agree for it to manifest, or I agree for it to manifest, or the drum of manifestation. But the thing there is that it has this human interaction, this human agent that basically ignites a catalyst for a certain phenomenon or for a certain situation. So what this means as Ekwensu, as Ezawu, master of revelation, is that whatever thing that we are doing in this world can be ignited by the essence or spirit of Ekwensu. So it could be negative in terms of war and being violent, and it could be positive in terms of it helping us human beings to achieve all the things that we want to achieve. And something similar to it is Awu. So you can basically look at them as two separate entities, or basically just I'm not saying anything. So the next that I have here is burying of monarchs with the bloods of virgins. Okay, so we all know that we have Igbo people, we have this saying, Igbo enweze. The Igbo people don't fall under one singular rule. They don't have any kingship system, but what we have is a collection of elders, lineage elders. These are the pigs. This was the Igbo system. Now, the whole kingship system came with the European incursion and the exaltation of the warrant chiefs. So from there, we now had this monarchical system, because of course, England, they have a monarchical system, and it's something that we don't have here. So because we don't have this monarchical system, it becomes something unimaginable for us to believe that our ancestors used the blood of virgins to basically bury the monarchs, or they used human beings to bury people. We already don't have any monarch that we have to basically use people to as a whatever for their burial. So since we don't have that, this particular response becomes something fraudulent and something that is not part of our ancestral Igbo society. Now, the next one, which is the third one, is human sacrifice in order to pacify deities. Okay, so as a researcher, as a cultural researcher, I've basically gone to quite a good number of shrines, and I've interacted with the Akajo for basically people that just come around there to basically meet the deity and ask for one or two things. And never have I seen any request of a deity asking them to basically, come and appease me with a human blood. But a deity can actually tell you, come and meet me with a certain livestock, a certain yam or kola nut, or all those things. But we've been told that one of the reasons why people don't like ordinary or ancestral belief system is because they used human beings to basically pacify deities, which is something that I've never seen. And up till now, even the Akajo, for the people in charge, will tell you that it is something that is not happening. Now, these are also the same deities. You have to understand that have, I say that we call it Mwana Sobala. they abhor blood, and this is even one of the reasons why most women are not really allowed to become akajo for alosi, because of our menstrual cycle. And our menstrual cycle, we shed blood, and when a woman is shedding blood and it's in front of a deity, it's as if you're feeding that deity with that menstrual blood. So if that is the case, how then are we being told that our ancestors used human beings to pacify deities? So these are basically common in the Nollywood movies that have already filled our head, and we don't even see things differently or from an indigenous perspective again. The fourth thing here is the institution of deities with human beings. So the whole Christian idea falls under a savior that died, sacrificed himself for me and you to basically have life and have life eternal. That's the foundation of the Christian belief. Be like Christ-like. Now, the same thing where Christians exalt the sacrifice of a savior, that it is the same thing that has been perfected in the Igbo system. Now, this means is that there are different ways of, instituting a deity, a domo. Now, it could be from the aspect of, an ancestral lineage. It could be probably because of a certain lack, or because of something that is maybe going horribly wrong in a family. For instance, a family that is having issues with gender or child mortality, and they will need to institute something like a paliomumu or a deity in whatever capacity to serve or to help them to solve that problem. Now, that whole sacrifice is done voluntarily. It is not something that our ancestors imposed. Now, people will say, but there are some people that impose it. Now, it's a human thing and not a custom, and not part of the spiritual belief. And those people that imposed that kind of sacrifice by killing a woman or killing virgin or killing anybody without the person seeing it as an act of sacrifice, we have a word for it. We call it opunwanda. Now, at the end of the day, that particular thing that they did traps that family, and the family keeps paying and paying and paying. So in some situation, you see them buying, replacing or appeasing the spirit of that woman that they used for that kind of sacrifice with a live cow. And that cow, whenever it dies, they replace it. Whenever it dies, it replaces it. So from generation to generation, you see a particular family that perpetually replaces a cow as a way to appease what one of their ancestors did by using or imposing that kind of sacrifice on a woman. So another way where Igbo people will institute deities is deities that we met Umuambara, essence that we met when our ancestors they tried to establish themselves in a particular location. So they met some spirit beings that they had an agreement with, that they had an agreement with, and they established themselves there. So from there, they can decide to basically, venerate or serve that person. So another one is through an ancestral lineage. Some people in Ebonyi, I was taught that some of these deities were the progenitors of a particular lineage, that their predecessors decided to use it as a way to communicate to God. Now, in Christianity, they'll tell you, honor thy father and thy mother. In Ordinary, they will tell you that if you see your father, if you see your mother, then you've seen your ancestors, you've seen the ndiche. Onye forum nnaye afugo ndiche. So this is the same thing but different interaction, but one is being demonized and one is being exalted. Now, the biggest lie of the century is them teaching us that polygamy is a sin. Now, polygamy is in nowhere a sin. So for people that have that mindset, it is not a sin. It is a way of life. A man could decide to have more than one wife with the permission of his wife. And the problem here is that because the concept of monogamy is now being exalted, now people don't want to basically participate in polygamy, which is okay and which is right. If a woman does not want to be in a polygamous home, she has that right to say it and she maintains it. Now, the problem here is that men are no longer going into polygamy with the right intentions. They're going into polygamy for control, or they're going into polygamy because they think it's a man's right, but that's not it. Now, in those days, our ancestors got into polygamy because probably they want to have a male child or they want to, because of economic factors. They were farmers then, and for a man that has like a large portion of land, he needs many farm aids. And some of those farm aids, instead of basically paying for such labor, he can basically have it within his family. Now there are reasons why this thing, or even because of the woman's menstrual cycle, because in Igbo society, they'll tell you that it is not safe or it's not good for a woman to cook for her husband when she's cooking, but when she's on her period. But the truth there is that the whole thing about the menstrual cycle is that our ancestors saw it as a time where a woman should rest, because honestly we have cramps during this period. So how many of us are even suffering for it? In those days, they leave these women to just stay in a secluded area to basically go through this pain, this menstrual pain, the fatigue, the purging associated with it. Now these days, we women, we're on our cycle and we are walking. We're on our cycle and we are jumping from pillar to pole. So it becomes one of the reasons why they said no, women should just like a time off. And again, the woman's menstrual cycle is something that is very powerful. Now I've heard about astral projections that women carry out when they are in their monthly cycle. So they perform this astral projections, and I said that they get their inspiration for drawing the uli. So when the white man came and saw our system, they said that it is ungodly, it is on this. But the same people that told us that polygamy is ungodly is practicing polyamory and practicing different kind of marriage system, and the whole homosexuality stuff. But they told us that polygamy is a sin, but the other one is not a sin. So it becomes contradictory. So polygamy is not a sin in an African setting. It's even in a Christian setting, it is not a sin. So the only problem there is that all parties involved have to be aware and have to decide that this is what we want for ourselves. It is not something that our ancestors imposed on anybody. It was not imposed on the woman, and it's not imposed on the man. There has to be a consensus before any man goes into polygamy, and the man has to be financially able to take care of his entire family. So all those things are prerequisites towards the institution of polygamy in an African setting. But other than that, polygamy is not a sin. For people that want polygamy, for people that want to engage in polygamy, it is okay for them, and it's a system that we can make use of. Now, the sixth lie is that God can defeat the devil, Ekwensu. So it's just like, let me talk about the combination of good and bad, the positive and negative energy. Both of them just exist. Okay, many of us see God as this all good, all knowing, all powerful being, and the devil as all dark, or forgetting that the devil was also an angel. So how can something that was initially all light, all gracious, all of a sudden becomes all dark? So that's like another conversation, another argument. But in this case, you can look at God as a positive energy and the devil as a negative energy. Now these two energies complement each other. God exists because the devil exists. The devil exists because God exists. Now without the devil, God would not exist, and without the devil, God would not exist. Because if we should remove the devil from the equation, then that means that we don't have any other thing to fear. We don't have something that we have to fear, something that we need to rebuke, in able to attain to, basically for God to look at us, favorable. But there has to be an enemy. There has to be something that we have to fight. There has to be something that we have to be distracted on. So that is what happens here. But both of them complement each other, because throughout, even the Bible says that God has given us the power to trample on the devil, to defeat the devil. But for some purpose or for some reason, for centuries of years, where the church, every religious institution has been praying against the devil, but the devil is still very much living and still basically, doing whatever he's doing in the society. It simply tells you that good and bad exist. The devil and God exist, and none of them can defeat each other. They are two aspects of one huge catalyst. So both of them are just the same thing. But for there to be order in the society, and for an absence of chaos, there has to be something good and something bad. Something to tell you that you don't have to do, something to basically guard you and enable you basically to live a life the way you want to live it. So instead of seeing, the devil and God as one has to defeat the other, I want you to understand that these two energies would exist and none of them would basically defeat the other. Now, when you understand it this way, now bring it down to Igbo spirituality, you will now understand that the religious belief, Christianity or the church, is not God in that sense, and ordinary belief system is not the devil, which means the church cannot defeat ordinary and ordinary cannot defeat the church. Both of them just exist on their own. The seventh thing that you should know today, the seventh lie about the seventh Christian lie that you should know is that deities can be destroyed. Okay, so many people have carried family liberation or been told that the cause of your misfortune is being caused by a certain deity in your family. Then that means that you have to destroy it, you have to burn the place. So what you're actually doing is you're only desecrating that power point, you're only desecrating that altar, you're only desecrating where that thing is. You've not destroyed it, you cannot destroy it. Deities are practically energies, they are practically spirits, and I don't think you destroying a physical representation of that deity means that you have destroyed that deity. What makes that deity is rooted in your foundation, it is rooted in your root. Some of these deities where we basically institute them were basically where some of these deities, when they lived in their human form, where they died and were buried. Now because they lived and were buried in that locations, are you going to basically scoop out the skeletal remains of such ancestor that has been ordained a deity? Are you going to basically scoop out or dig out the whole underground sand that is in that location? You cannot do that. So the whole physical one that you're seeing is just something that you're physically seeing. It's just an interface where we interact with deities. It is not the deity. Now, Professor Ome's son, Chidoziem Ome, he said that an Ofeke, even Ofeke, carries an Okukawu. He thinks that he has carried the Awu itself. But if you look for the Awu, you should find the Awu in God's house. Ofeke buru nkwawu, ochere no buru gawu. I've forgotten how he said it, but I shall hope you understand where I'm coming from. So what I'm trying to say here is that the physical representation of a deity is not the deity. What makes up a deity is the essence that we imbue into that physical representation. And there are other aspects of this technicality, which I think I'm going to basically do another video on it because it's quite longer, trying to explain what happens, this physical representation, because it's obvious that some of us don't know that these deities are not permanently resided in that effigy or around that area. They go out, they interact, they see their friends, and they come back. So imagine you destroying the hunk of wood where the essence of that deity is not even around. So what are you doing? What are you removing? You're not doing anything about it. So whatever makes up a deity, whatever makes up an Irumwa, is in that root and not basically that thing that we are saying. So the next thing the eighth lie that we've been told is that Mamiwater, marine spirits, are demonic. Now in Igbo spirituality, we need to understand that Ndemiri or Mamiwater or Nemiri, whatever, are the purest energies that we have. Our people would say Ndemiri na satite. Now this means that if you're trying to engage with marine spirits, you have to be at your best, not just behavior, but you have to be purified. You have to be pure in body, in soul, in thoughts. Every single thing about you has to be pure. That's why we want to perform water rituals. You see people wearing, white garments to symbolize purity, to symbolize that as my body is pure, so is my spirit, so is my heart, so is my consciousness. Everything about me is pure. Now, when you perform in some very dirty behaviors like abortion, then your spirit family, your Ndo will tell you that they are going to curse you because of that careless behavior that you did, like promiscuity. That's why you see some of these Ezewan and they don't engage in some attitude, in some things because of their profession or because of the spirit that are attached to them, because they know that the marine spirit that are attached to them don't have tolerance for indecent or promiscuous behaviors. So when people tell us that Indian Miri are demonic, and from an ancestral point of view, or from from an Igbo point of view, I'm telling you today that these are just lies, because Indian Miri, whom they have been blamed to be demonic, are the purest spirits in Igbo spirituality and cosmology that can actually interact with, and they will make sure that as pure as they are, you that is coming to them would equally represent that purity. Now, the ninth lie is about female subjugation. Now, it's a very interesting topic for me, because me coming into Ordinary was basically to understand these gender relations. Don't do this, a woman, don't, basically before I began to understand Ordinary from an adult's perspective. I've always seen people talking down on women and clamping it up to it is how our culture is. But it is not how our culture is. I look at the intentions behind every culture or every culture that I basically encounter. I want to understand why it has been done or practiced. For instance, the shaving of a woman's hair after she has lost her husband. I came to the to the realization that the reason why it is done is because this is the last right and the last respect a woman can give her dear husband. Now, if this is the reason for asking women to shave their hair, then I think it is a viable one. But I do believe that things can actually be changed, cultures can be improved on. Now, because of this social dissonance that we know now, many people don't already understand this cultural practice like I understand it. There is a need for you to teach or to enlighten people on why a certain culture is being done. When they tell you that you shouldn't do, they say don't also forget that some of this culture that we assume is our culture are just aspects of colonial infiltration. It is not indigenously our culture. It's something that we adopted. It's something that we learned. So whenever I come across this kind of culture, I basically trying to understand the intentions behind it. Because when I ask this question about why is it that women don't become Akajafo to Alasi, I asked a friend and he was very emphatic about it. He said that, the reason why a woman that squats to pee, a woman that does this, a woman that does that. So all those interactions. And I told him that's not true. All those things you're saying is just exalting your ego, is exalting you as a man, but you've not answered the question why a woman shouldn't do this. So I try to understand the why. And once I understand the why, I see them reasonable enough not to imbibe. Now this is the right approach. Now for some other people, it comes off as female subjugation, but it's not for female subjugation. Now our people will tell you that if wow or which means that some of the things that we are doing now, it's just an aberration that we've normalized to become our culture. Now, in our society, I don't know any society that will tell you that a woman is going to get married and the spiritual family or her spirit, her spiritual essence would leave her father's house and go to her husband's house with her. We call it Ogusonwani, a GJD. All those things. Or tell me a culture where a woman will be maltreated in her husband's house and her brothers and her family will run to her rescue. Or tell me a culture that sees marriage as EJD or believes that when a woman is in one other number, so which means that EJD is in one other number, which all means that the woman can go to her husband's house, marry, do all the things she wants to. Then when she dies, she's brought back. Her body is brought back to her father's house. We call it I've forgotten, but we have a particular name for it. Because in those days, women are not buried in their husband's house. Women are buried in their father's house. EJD. So there are other aspects of this culture that when I look at it and understand the interaction, I see it differently. But aside some of this culture, and I think next culture that I want to basically explore is female genital mutilation, which For the little information I have, I've processed it in my head, and I don't see any excuse, any viable reason there. But hopefully soon enough, I'm going to try to basically do a research on it and give it and basically report my findings to this channel. So the last one here is that Africans were barbaric. Africans were never barbaric. If we look at our cultural practices and how we basically attend to things, it will tell you that we were never barbaric. Some people say that how can we say that Africans that the white men enslaved us, that it was already something we're already doing on ourselves. And the truth here is that in Africa we practice slavery, but it's not the same thing with what our colonial masters did. And people that are basically doing this comparison actually making a lot of mistakes. Now, in Igbo society, most slaves are gotten basically after wars. And the same way that most of those slaves are even sometimes they're taking an anapuchiye or one day burebo. For instance, when two communities are at war and some people are being murdered or killed, and after that the people are going to basically give a little part of their burial in their own community to those people in that community as a way to basically give them back what they lost during the war. Another thing they do here is that these people who slaves can only serve for a couple of 7 years before they are reintegrated into the society. They are given lands and they are given a woman to marry, and before you know it, you will not even know that they were once slaves. And they were never dehumanized, unlike what our ancestors. They were not raped. The women were not killed even while pregnant, and our pregnant women were not cut open and their babies slashed, and our men were not sodomized. So there is a lot of things you need to understand about this whole Africans having their own kind of a slavery. So these are the things that for some reasons we forget, that the civilizations that were more barbaric than us is the people that we are now exalting as our saviors, as people that came to rescue us from being barbarians. So these are just like one big paradox that we just basically assimilated into our society, and each generation we keep basically giving back this vibe, and we keep spreading it and spreading them to the next generation. So if you have any other contributions, don't also forget to let me know, and let's have a good conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't also forget to give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, and if you want any video specification, don't also forget to basically tell me about it. So without any further ado, if you have any further thing to say, let's basically carry over this conversation next time. If you want me to talk about a practice and basically give my own input, I'll also do that. And until next time, like I say.